to all of my team members at Humtown that are family to me. The end. You've been listening to the Industrial Athlete Operating System, where human performance empowers Industry 4.0. And now, we have the authors in the studio, Mark Lamoncha and Tim Figley. Gentlemen, congratulations on the book and on the audio book. Congratulations on the idea of bringing it from up here onto the page. And thank you for doing that work. Let me ask this question. Why this book? Why now?
The Manufacturing 4.0 is coming to the forefront, and they're leaving the People 4.0 out of it. And there's no greater innovation on earth than people. So if we don't match those two up, we're going to leave the most important part of our life's equation out of it, people.
What do you say about that, Tim?
Yeah, I think when I met Mark and got to know his system and knew his heart, right? He had his own personal transformation. And as we do see a lot of challenges in the world, we're often not seeing each other for who we are. And as Mark has stated so many times, and we've talked about in the book, people, they're not thriving a lot of times in their workplaces. Therefore, they're not thriving in their lives. And I think that 9 to 5 window, sometimes that might be half of our adult waking lives that we spend in that place. And if we can transform that for people, we can really transform their whole life. And that affects their marriage, it affects their health, their stress levels, everything else. And I think it's important both for the leaders in the workplace, but also the individuals to get another perspective that will give them more of a thriving experience that they can take all around their life.
That's what I gained as I read through the book, and it was that you're dealing with a whole person here rather than, here, we've got this slot that needs to be filled. Would you fit in there? You are dealing with emotions, intellect, will of a unique individual, and you're trying to make them be the best that they can be. That's your goal, right, Mark?
Absolutely. The potential, we're looking for the greatest energy on earth, and the greatest energy on earth is inside of the greatest creation and innovation on earth. And, there was an industrial revolution, and a lot of the part of that was to do lights out, which meant to let's automate people out of the equation. What we need to do is, with Manufacturing 4.0, is not to make that same mistake. We need to actually integrate people with and let people release their potential through the technology instead of feeling that they're going to be replaced by it.
Yes. And with the rise of AI, I see this, or if I just go to the grocery store and I check out my own, do my own checkout, it feels like people are being replaced. And in a factory setting, an industrial setting, that's the real fear that the people on the line have, that you're not going to need me. But what you've written is, no, you are valuable to this company because of the unique individual that you are.
Right, and those perspectives create new and different innovations, by reestablishing, there's an ability to coach to win games, and there's an ability to coach the winner inside of the person. And you're going to have a much greater performance level when they feel that they are integrated into the game or integrated into manufacturing. And we can find that first we have to find that people have an interest in the occupation they're in. And that has a lot to do with some of the things we talk about career. The difference between a job, is that, I don't want to get up, I can't wait to go home, and I can't wait to retire. When you have a career, you have interest, purpose, passion, and engagement. And when you have that, you never work a day in your life. And that's the goal of, a lot of times the word was either supervisor, manager, or boss. Those are all going to contain energy. But in order to release it, you have to be able to coach at an individual level that person's performance that is locked up inside of them to really, to let that out.
And I think that was one of my main questions when I got to the end was if I'm a person in an industrial setting and I'm on the line and I'm doing, making the widgets or whatever it is that the company makes, and I get a wind of what you've talked about with this VES, I'm thinking, man, this would just change everything. But if my manager or my supervisor or the owner doesn't buy into this, is there a way will this work from the bottom up, or does it have to be a top-down decision that we're going to go this direction?
It has to work from the top down. It's a culture inside of that person to realize that they see their people. We have the balance sheet. Everybody talks about it. They have all their assets and liabilities. But the greatest asset really isn't on the balance sheet. It's the human potential inside of each one of those people. And until you recognize that, when you put a robot in, you're going to actually take if they even do have an incentive system, they're going to take the code away. We will leave that code with that person. They will fall in love with that robot. That robot only cycles the way another human being made it to cycle. And if I allow them to take the incentive code, they're going to make that robot, be like the best concert or the best, musical ever produced. But if they think it's replacing them, they're going to thwart it, and they're not going to release their innovation inside of that technology.
Yeah. Tim, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think as a writer and a consultant talking to Mark, I think what's important is for leaders to be able to have that desire to see the heart of people, because as we have the rise of AI and all these things that are causing fear of it's going to take my job away, there has to be innovation, not just for that, but innovation of how are we going to better work with others? How are we going to better use innovation and innovative ideas to really allow people to be more self-expressive or to take advantage of what they have, of what technology exists, and use it to the betterment for everybody together. And so I think that was what captivated me, was Mark was not as interested in just the technology, although he has multiple patents and there is a technology interest that he has, but the greatest innovation that he wanted to accelerate was the people. And I think it takes that from leaders so that they can accelerate the hearts of people and have that desire to see people around them grow to the best they can become.
Mark, have you seen leaders do this then? Owners of companies catch that vision, because it's almost like you have to ignite that fire in them. And it's not just the bottom line, we make more money or more product, more profit. It's almost like what you're saying can happen inside a company is that everything gets better. It's like an explosion.
Well, it had to happen inside of me. And to your question, it's very limited, the mindset. Even with sales, in a lot of cases, when somebody doubles or triples the sales, a lot of times they will either try to cut the commission or they will try to cut the territory. And sales, in every way, additional sales dilute the cost of manufacturing. So why, if they make 10 times as much, why wouldn't you allow them to release that potential? So the same thing is true in the plant. When you don't restrict their earnings and you allow them to get the law of the lid and just blow it off, that's when you start to see this level of innovation that comes out. Everybody is capable of innovation. It could be an engineer, but it doesn't have to be. When you have a positive mindset, it's like a beautiful greenhouse. It creates energy and it's full of life. And when you try to contain people, you have more darkness, and it's basically I have to versus I want to.
Yeah. The visual learning system was just, as I'm reading about it, it makes so much sense to me. But at the same time, I have never worked in a situation like you're talking about. I've done a lot of radio stuff, and I've done a lot of writing things that I'm alone with, or working at a radio station where you have to have other people next to you, sometimes nonprofit in the nonprofit arena. And I'm thinking, how would you do that in a nonprofit, for example? How would you be able to do? You can't have the same VES in front of them, but you think there are principles that we can apply. Is that right?
You have to look at every one of them. We started out with this in a presentation to look at cleaning hotel rooms. Basically, you figure out what the average time is, and then you'll find, and what the qualitative measure is. So basically what happens is now, instead of cleaning one room in 1 hour, you're finding people that will clean 6 rooms in 1 hour. And, if a guest checks in and they rate it 4 stars and you make a little less, you're going to be focused. You can't just be fast. You have to make it right. And you would have to look at the metrics, in a studio, and there isn't almost anywhere that you can't find a way to improve the performance and the use of time, because you can never get it back, but you can make better use of it. So it would be an interesting project to look at a studio, and figure that out.
Yeah, and to be able to do that, then your hotel example is a very good one. That if the bed is not made, or the rug is not vacuumed as well as you want it to be, do you come up, even at Humtown, do you come up to the place where you say to an employee, we don't think that you're in the right slot here. This may not be the best place for you. Have you been able to transfer them into a place where they do thrive because they can't get the work done in a quality way?
One of the things that we did even in 2010, when we had the 220 people, I didn't even like getting up and going to work, and I owned the company. So it was an opportunity to allow divine intervention to reinvent it. So I was more excited. We went to 6-hour lines because my sons were playing hockey, and I was trying to transfer, sports into work. So instead of calling it a shift, which most people don't communicate and don't get along between them, when you exchange a hockey line, you have to transfer information, in real time. And you don't play a game for 8, 10, or 12 hours. So we even found that if somebody works 1 extra hour over 6, they lose 17% efficiency. So that 17% efficiency, to most people's mindset that own a company, is money. To me, it's 17% chance of getting hurt, or a 17% greater chance of making a mistake. So, it was seeing the mindset of performance in sports and translating, the from a work environment to more like a high performance environment, and making that more exciting and engaging. And the main thing that we did was actually go after a system, out of Texas that was Profiles International. That we have a lot of systems that look at DISC and different, quality, of the person, looking at the psychological of the person. But what we did is we, over 2 years, engineered every team position. We reverse engineered it on the basis of thinking style, interest, and behavior. We had a 70% turnover rate that we got down below 10 because we didn't have the right person in the right seat on the right bus going the right place. So after you engineer the thinking style, interest, and behavior of each position on the team, then you have them take an assessment when you're recruiting people into your company, and you look at their thinking style, interest, and behavior, and then you line those up. And between that and changing more to a place of performance, we actually were able to get people that were aligned back. A lot of people look at the behaviors of people not aligned or interested, and they want to control that behavior when they really need to get them into the right slot. Back to your question.
That's the secret sauce right there. So Tim, industrial athlete, when I say those two words together, what comes to your mind?
I think as Mark talked about a moment ago, that idea of coming to perform, coming ready to go. When we see athletes, I remember we talked about in the book how the Olympics provide something where people they don't even get paid, but they're out there and they'll work 4 years in order to go out and perform their best, right? Use their talents, use their skills, do something to compete on the world stage. And it really captivates the world. The whole world watches people perform at their highest level because it says something about the human spirit, right? It says something that we were able to achieve something that maybe the rest of us couldn't achieve, or somebody was able to go the extra mile or do something like that. And I think an industrial athlete, that the concept is getting that human spirit to reach its maximum potential and perform at the highest level, thrive while doing it, and being rewarded for doing it just like an athlete would be on a playing field that's willing to go out and put their whole selves in.
So how do you then transition? Let's say that the manager, the supervisor, the owner has the idea, we're going to implement this. How does the worker on the line or whatever they're doing, how do you transition from just showing up and doing what you're punching the clock and becoming an industrial athlete?
Well, I think, the interesting thing is the book had 4 parts to it. And it's transforming a workplace into a performance center. It's transforming from boss to coach, from employee to industrial athlete, and then from a tug of war to a win-win culture. And I think all 4 of those parts are very important to get that result, to get that person motivated. When we were talking a moment ago about can this go into a nonprofit or something like that, we use an acronym GAME, G-A-M-E, and it stands for goal. What is your measurable goal? A, what are the actions you're going to take? M, how are you going to measure those actions? Are we getting closer to our goal? And E, a time of reflection, evaluation. E for evaluation of when are we going to look and see how we're doing so we can get into the process of continuous improvement. But activating people to come in with maybe they come in just with a mindset of I'm not really eager to, I'm just getting a job. To the point where they're an industrial athlete, I think takes all those components. So you have to have coaches that are willing to see what their potential. But the system that's in place, the performance center system with the visual earning system, because they're seeing their earnings in real time, they're able to affect it. So that puts the ball in their court. They're able to actually have control over things they never had control over before, and therefore that process of continuous improvement, what they were doing, for maybe 3 weeks, all of a sudden 3 months later, maybe they've increased their performance 50, 70, 100% because they actually had control over what they could do and they were rewarded in the process.
This must give you, Mark, as you look at your employees, it must give you a certain sense of helping them come alive, vibrancy, abundance that you're seeing. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me anything about the employees that and you don't have employees, you have industrial athletes. I get that.
Right, I know.
But what's the change that you saw in them once you implemented this?
It really has to do with value. The whole earth is based on the value of things over the value of people. We see that in the beginning, we see that at the end. And I think the way they are seen is the way they behave. And, there would be many different things that I could share about it. But when I walked in before, it was like, you're here for me. And now I walk in and it's I'm here for you. You're my customer. And we've come up, you'll see in the book this, I was talking with Brian, one of our production coaches, and we were talking about the skeleton watch where you can see all the gears move. And as we were talking, I said, we have static org charts. We have, static corporate ladders. And, if you climb a ladder with somebody else on it, you're going to hurt them or hurt yourself. And so a company is a series of subsets of all these different gears in shipping, in production, in maintenance. But what does a watch deliver? The hands on a normal watch, without seeing anything behind it, deliver time. In our company, they deliver a sand core product. But what is the most important gear inside of that skeleton watch. It's the one that's missing, or it's the one that the gear is burred. So every one of those gears, I might have more teeth on mine, or it might be a larger gear, but every person in that company to make that function has an equal importance for delivering that product, in our case, cores in a watch time. So, if we're going to really change the way things are and the way we're talking about mindsets and mind shifts, and an employee denotes ownership. They're my performance family. They're not my, in our plant, we're one of 2 companies in the United States that gives all the food away for free. I wouldn't charge my family at home for food. Why would you charge your family at work for food? So there's been, and Tim will tell you, it's been a long series of him continuing to tell me that, I made you, and each person that comes to you, you need to value them over the value of things, and it's an incredible mind shift when you get to that point. You just can't wait to see what's next. And moving back to the VES or visual learning system, when you take them out of pay rate jail and you unlock their potential, and Brian will even tell you, he kept a journal for a year and he moved his rate, somewhere up to like $40 an hour. He was called back to this large company, and he stayed because he was waiting for me. In almost all incentive systems, they have people that come out and study you. And this system allows you to study yourself. In the real time of each cycle, you get to see whether or not. So I don't need an industrial engineer to come look at me. I become my own industrial engineer. And I try something that gets better. I try something and it might get worse. But the last thing that you ever want to do with one of your team members is to say, oh, you broke that, or, oh, that cost $1,000. What you really want to say if you want to release potential is, what did you learn from that? And then move on.
How many times have I could use that with my kids too, just to be.
We were talking about that today.
Yeah.
You aren't the boss. You want to be the coach. So how do you get over that? Tim, let me have you jump in there right there.
Well, I think it comes back to what Mark said a moment ago about seeing this as a work family. And the proof is in the pudding. Like when he says, hey, I give my family food, right? That shift is, you're working for me as the boss. I'm telling you what to do. Whereas a coach is more of that servant leadership idea, where they're coming in and they're thinking, how can I help both unlock what this person's capable of, but help them succeed? And if I help 5 people do it, now our team is succeeding in a greater way. So because they need to be motivated by their own earnings, now as a coach, I'm shifting from trying to tell them, hey, you need to get this done, do this, do that, and giving a lot of instruction, to really, there's a cost if they don't do it. So they want to continue to earn more. So the motivation is coming not only with an extrinsic reward, but an intrinsic desire to succeed and grow themselves. And so as a coach, you have an advantage to be able to say, what do you need from me? How can I help you here? What's going to be best? And you can continue to have that dialogue rather than a monologue. And that's a really important, I think, distinction, is dialogue over monologue, so that we're collaborating to say, how can this group succeed more? Or how can you reach your full potential? Or how can we collectively get to this better result?
What it brings to me, as I have read and now I'm hearing you, what it tells me is that there is a shift in trust, that the workers, looking at the boss with distrust, you're kind of on an equal playing field, and you're working together for wins for everybody rather than, look at those people up there and this distance. You have bridged the gap and there's more trust. Is that what you've seen, Mark?
So you brought up a perfect landing spot. Brian, what I talked about earlier was, I'm earning $40 an hour or 400% a rate. When's he going to change the rate? Because all incentive systems, and I really don't like that word anymore, and then the company keeps that benefit and doesn't pay that incentive. When that money was already there from the very beginning, and by releasing that potential, they can raise their rate and not feel that trust factor that you're going to pull that off the table.
Yeah, and I think what the trust factor also goes to the culture part now, which was the fourth part of the book. And it's going from a tug-of-war culture to a win-win culture. The trust is not going to be there if it's not a win-win. And when you talk about getting on an equal playing field, it really has to be a win-win. So whether it's a coach, an industrial athlete, or someone else, there needs to be a win-win. You can't go into the conversation thinking, I know more than you. Yeah, I might know more about something, but there's also something that you know. And the synergy, the collective miracle, if you will, the innovation, the invention is going to come through the dialogue, the win-win mindset, to know that as we talk, we're going to find something else that we didn't either conceive before we got into this conversation.
I love what you're saying because in the creative process, I work alone an awful lot. Mm-hmm. And when I work with other people, there can be this push-pull, I know that. But when you work together, you have ideas that come. I never thought about that. So there is this win that can come. But I really have to ask this question before we end. And Mark, you detailed the process of turning the company around when you were right. You were in big trouble. Let's just be honest with you.
Yeah.
You were in big trouble. Do you think that really can happen with other companies?
It's the desire and the fire inside of you. I will say that we actually had several points where team members said, help me keep my job. But earlier in an earlier instance where the company had a financial bump, in the road, I was driving home. We had to seek counsel on, what we were going to do. And it was a cold, dark, snowy night. I drive in the driveway and I said, oh God, I could lose my home. And then he said, shame on you. 53 other people could lose their home. And that was when I really had a turning point on who I was there for. And it's a ministry and an opportunity to change lives. And all lives are important, all the way from, the CEO to the person that loads the truck.
That's what I picked up throughout. There's something spiritual that's going on here. Something very personal, very spiritual that grabbed a hold of you and that made a change in your life that has now filtered down through everybody who works with you and the people who you serve outside the company, that you're selling to. They sense this as well. Would you agree with that, Tim?
Absolutely. I think two key words here are marketplace, ministry. And we kind of document a little bit of that in the book, not a ton, but I think with getting to know Mark, it was understanding that even the things he's asked me to do or he's asked others to do, it's make sure we're doing this out of a marketplace ministry. This is our ministry. This is what we are to do. This is how we serve others, even though we're in a marketplace. And even though we serve the market. So it went from just solely a business focus, win at all costs, to a marketplace ministry that ministers not only to the people inside that we've talked about, but it's how Brandon, Mark's son, takes that mindset every day to work with all stakeholders and customers and serves them, whether there's going to be a transaction or not. It's not about the transaction. It's about the relationship that's going to build a future bond.
Mark, any words along those lines?
We were created and innovative to be relational, not transactional. And with all the IT and the, and all the technology, the pull is to be transactional, but the goal needs to be relational. And in there lies the way that you value people over valuing things.
Well, I can't thank you enough for putting this down on the page and the audio that we now have to kind of ignite that transformation that you're talking about. Mark Lamoncha, Tim Figley, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.